Okay, it's just a little after 2 o'clock. We'll get started with our 2020 High School Registered Apprenticeship webinar series on CTE instruction requirements and registered apprenticeship. A few housekeeping items before we kick it off. Please introduce yourself in the chat box with your name and your organization that you belong to. If you need to ask a question throughout the presentation, please put it in the Q&A section so we can get to those questions at the end of the presentation. A recording of the webinar will be added to futurereadyiowa.gov and earnandlearniowa.gov at the completion of this webinar series. So today we have a great presenter, Dave Webkin, a consultant with the Board of Education Examiners. He's going to talk to us all about CTE requirements, and then we'll go into questions and answers for everyone that are on the call. So David, I'll kick it over to you. Thanks for joining us.
All right, very good. You bet. My name is Dave Wempen. I'm a consultant at the Iowa Board of Educational Examiners, and I'm going to be talking today about our pathway to provide teachers for programs, and there's a wide variety of options we'll find out. The Iowa Board of Educational Examiners licenses all educators. Now, there is a couple other options for registered apprenticeships or for the career academies, you might call them, to have their instructors. You can also go through an Iowa Community College and they can certify the instructor, and that would be for college credit. Our focus is mainly on those programs that just want to issue high school credit. And so we have a CTE authorization program that I'm going to be spending all of my time on today. And certainly at the end, if you have questions, I'll be willing to answer those, or you can put them in the chat and we'll find time to respond to that. So we're gonna, next slide, please. We're gonna start by talking about some general things here with the CTE authorizations. First, I've been working with the BOE for 8 years and I'm not a CTE person by trade. I was a social studies teacher, but I also served as an administrator for 12 years. And my last stop, I got involved with a program when I was working at Earlham Community Schools, in which we sent kids to the Madison County Career Academy. So I base a lot of my credit or blame for being here in this position upon that, in that I saw the true value of it when we had students at Earlham that would spend a half day going to the Madison County Career Academy and learning the construction trades. And Winterset Schools had a great agreement at that time with a contractor who would spend half of his day teaching high school students from about 3 or 4 high schools the building trades process. And then those kids would spend the other half day back in the school building getting their general education credits. Lots of different models, certainly some options of how you can do the credit part, but I saw the value in those students actually pounding the nails and learning how to do everything, how to build a house from the concrete all the way up to the shingles. And years later, and still once in a while, I see some of those students who went through that program and they're still out in the field earning money, contributing to society, and generally happy with the route they took, because many of them would not have finished high school had it not been for a program like that. So lots of success stories out there, but that's what got my involvement in it. And I'm passionate about continuing to provide these options for Iowa students and want to continue to help people get licensed to teach that have expertise in the vocational areas. So what we first issue is called an initial career and technical authorization. We do have people that go through traditional routes to teach CTE areas, like if someone goes to University of Northern Iowa to be an industrial tech teacher. We have people that go to Iowa State to become an FCS, Family Consumer Science teacher. And we have people that go to Iowa State also to become vocational agriculture teachers. So that's one simple pathway, but that requires a 4-year degree and a lot of investment of time and education. So this pathway is based more on experience. And so to be able to qualify, you have to be an expert in your field. And that is a way to qualify for that endorsement. and you have to be specific in that field. And we'll get some examples of that in a little bit. But the areas I copied from one of our flyers include, but not limited to, that list there. So we have some general areas. If we talk about the vocational areas, from industrial, we have areas from health sciences, we have areas from agriculture or food services and food production. We also have areas under business and information technology. So we've got a wide variety of options built within that. And also an example listed there is the military licenses for those that are teaching ROTC programs to high school students. We issue a CT authorization in military science. And so those veterans of our, one of our service groups from our country, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, National Guard, Coast Guard, so forth, those folks can come in and teach those ROTC programs to high school students and help them get entered into the military or an ROTC program after graduation. Next slide, please. So a bit more details into this of what this can look like. We require a job offer from an Iowa school district to issue a CTE authorization. And typically the busiest time of the year for the hiring of those is spring for fall jobs. Districts want to get it established and up and running. Although mid-year is also this time of year, we've licensed some people that are going to be starting in early January for second semester. But the vast majority of our people that we license start in the fall, so they can get 2 full semesters in and basically sign a contract for the entire school year. And on that theme, it does not have to be a full-time job. Like I mentioned, the Madison County Career Academy, that gentleman who is the expert in building worked for half a day, taught for half a day, and then went back to his business later on in the day and helped finish the projects that were happening either on the house that the students were building or his regular crew was working on maybe somewhere else in the community or the county. So it can be a part-time job, and some people like that, especially if you're in a business that you own or a profession like business, where you can still own and operate your own business, but also give back to the community. And possibly another big advantage of this is create a pipeline for applicants. We have lots of industrial positions, let's say welding, and we have people who say, I need welders in my company. If I come teach this for half a day and show the skills that we actually want our welders to learn, then after they graduate high school, I'm going to have first shot of employing them. And so that pipeline or pathway certainly can help the community and can help the economy in many ways. So the job offer has to be there. And once that is there, I ask people to contact me, or districts administrators sometimes contact me, and we start to provide the pathways and the directions and the links that we can use to start that. The fees for the initial CTE authorization are $160. As part of that, you have to do a background check for the state of Iowa. We, of course, want all our students to be safe, and so we want people to apply that have not had serious felonies throughout their background. But generally, very few of our people get denied a license because of that issue. So certainly call and ask if you're concerned about your background. But the hours then are the next important thing. We've had a 6,000, 4,000 option qualifying for over 25 years. The 3,000 is kind of new, and I'll share some later examples of that. But essentially, we're looking for thousands of hours of experience. You should be an expert in that specific area that you want to teach. And 6,000 hours is essentially the equivalent of 3 years of experience. So when we talk about number of hours of work, roughly 2,000 hours a year in a 40-hour job, 50 hours or 50 weeks a year gets you to 2,000. So 3 years if you do not have a BA or an AA degree of experience. And if you have the BA degree already, and 4,000 hours would be required. So 2 years plus the BA. And then a recent addition that we're added in the last several months and goes into effect in 2021 is if you have an AA degree in the specific CTE area, then 3,000 hours of experience are required. So you could start teaching that same thing. Let's go back to welding again. You got an AA degree in welding from an Iowa community college. You work for a year and a half as a welder. You could then qualify to be a CTE authorization teacher. And another type of example on that, we do have schools and companies that rotate their people through that program because they want to keep their people on as a long term. They don't want to give them up as full-time employees. So they rotate their welders in this situation through as the teachers. They just have to have each of them do it for a year or 2 years, and then they rotate them through so they can continue to keep their skills up in the industrial setting as well. The applicant completes a form with descriptions of their vocational experience. I'll have that on a slide in just a moment. And one other detail is the experience must be recent and relevant. I'm going to use myself as a non-example here. When I was in college and then early in my teaching career, I worked construction. I was a shingler. I worked for a crew that went around town. We tore off the shingles, put on the shingles. And so I probably have 6,000 hours of shingling experience. Would I be a good CTE teacher for all the building trades? Probably not. But it also is now over 20 years ago that I did that work. And so it would take me quite a bit of brushing up and probably another 6,000 hours to get me back on pace and be an expert at shingling. So that's why we want it to be recent and relevant. It also has to be relevant in that some of these areas get very finite, and you might have worked in a factory and ran a machine, but maybe you didn't have anything to do with the computer graphics side of it, the CNC type of work, where it was the programming of the computer. So you might be able to get a machining endorsement on a CT auth because you worked a machine and you had the metals experience of it. But if you were not doing the CNC exact work, then we would not issue an additional endorsement for the CNC or the computer aided drafting, this CAD work, because you didn't have that relevant experience related to CAD or CNC. So as I mentioned, recent, I should also detail, we look back at 10 years. So we'd like the work to be done in the last 10 years. That doesn't mean it has to be all in the last 10 years. If you start a job 12 years ago and it trails into the 10 years ago, your experience is still recent because the last year of it or the last months of it were during that 10-year period. So we look at those things and we want people who have been practicing that, and like I said, not out of practice like my shingling skills would be 20 some years later. Moving on to the next one then would be the example. A lot of people say, well, how much work am I going to have to go through? This is going to be very lengthy and problematic. The state of Iowa always makes you jump through lots of hoops. True, but not true. We do have application. You do have to fill it out. It takes most people 20 to 30 minutes to fill out the application. This form is one of the easiest parts of it. We don't ask you to get letters from every single employee. We simply ask you to list them on this form, the address and name of the employer, what type of work you did. That's probably the most important part because it details the exact specifics that you did. And then your dates of employment. Then we can see if it's recent. The estimated hours work per week and estimated total hours. So in that company, you might have had 2,000 hours. You worked for them for a year. Add another company, you might have worked for them for 3 years. Tack that in there. Add another company, you might have worked for them for 5. So you're building up that experience, showing that you are an expert and that your experience was relevant. Moving on, please, Amy. So we do have some rule changes that are going to expand this and make it easier for more people to qualify. I will note that these are going into effect in January. So we're getting pretty close. Applicants that are qualifying now, I'm saying, well, if you don't start the actual work till January, don't finish your application yet. we can qualify you in January under some of these other rules. As mentioned earlier, the 6,000 and 4,000 options have been there for a long time. 3,000 was added recently, and that is the AA with 3,000 hours in the specific associate degree area. And then the other two are going to be a learning model for me as well, and that I haven't dealt with these at all in my 8 years at the BOE, but it's going to take some scenarios to come in and some examples for me to become an expert on these myself. But holding a baccalaureate degree or graduate degree closely related in the teaching endorsement area sought. So I see a couple areas here are going to be especially applicable. One would be agriculture. We have applicants who get degrees in horticulture or animal science, or possibly agriculture business degrees. And they could combine that with some experience in that field, the 4,000 or 3,000, depending if they also had an AA degree. And if they have their degree in horticulture, then that can also qualify them to teach horticulture in a vocational agriculture setting in an Iowa high school. The baccalaureate degree could also be an area of study if at least 18 credit hours were earned in the teaching area. So once again, we could have someone who had a BA degree in ag business, but they did an AA degree in welding, but that wasn't their major in the AA because they were going to transfer to Iowa State or something like that. But they did take 18 credits of welding. So now we could give them some type of business endorsement or an agriculture business endorsement, and possibly welding if they've got 18 credits in that specific area. So as I said, I'm going to be learning along with the administrators in this front. But we did match this up, and I should add, this mirrors the Iowa community colleges and what they have done for the past several years. And we added this as a rule change in our administrative rules for the state of Iowa. So it would not be confusing, and it wouldn't be different tiers a community college instructor might have to be meeting. And that goes to another point in that we do have some people that get both. They work for the community college and they get a CTE authorization, so they can issue both high school credit and the community college credit. So in some cases, districts want that person to be CTE auth, so they could be their employee but issue the college credit, and vice versa. Some community colleges want them to be their employee, but they also want that person to get and be able to offer the high school credit. So those are the changes coming down the pike. If you call me, I might not know all the answers to that, but I'm going to certainly try. Next up then would be the courses. And this is what's probably different than the community colleges. They will probably ask their employees to do continuing education to keep up their skills. We ask people that plan on doing this in Iowa high schools for more than 3 years to take these 5 courses. And the last one I say lightly as a course, it's more of a training, but we ask them to take these 5 courses if they want to continue in that position for more than 3 years. The initial CTE is issued for 3 years. It can be renewed or extended. So if you don't get all 6 done here in the first 3 years, you can extend it for a year if you've just got 1 to finish. You can renew the initial for 3 more years if you're still making progress on it. But the goal of this is to, if you want to make this your career, your long-term job, that you have some education pedagogy and understand things like how to write tests, understanding the psychology of students, dealing with students that are on IEPs that have a special education issue and have a IEP for their individual disability. Also human relations, dealing with a wide variety of students in Iowa classrooms. And then the ethics training is the last one. That one is not a full course. It's typically a 15 seat hour course, can be taken from the Iowa AEA or Iowa ISEA, the state union, and they have online trainings to do the ethics side of things. And I'll talk a little bit more about the ethics at the end as well. So if you have questions about those do not have to be taken before you start. Those are taken during the term of the 3-year initial license. And we do have some providers that now offer all of the courses, or some people piece them together, take a couple of them from community colleges, and then take the rest of them from an Iowa college, university. Iowa State and UNI both have most of those available also. All right, sliding ahead then. Thank you. This is my contact information. Email is always best for me. I can send links and directions very easy by email, and I get back to those faster. If you call and I'm available, I'll try to answer, but if not, leave a message or email me. I'll get back to you when we can. As with most state agencies, right now we're working remotely, and so we're trying to keep up with calls. They ring directly through to us, but it's always a battle, especially in the summer, our busiest time. We can be backed up and behind on phone calls for a whole day or 24 hours or more. So email is the best. And I put this last slide up here also to talk about the ethics for just a little bit. So if Amy can slide ahead. General things for the BOE, I always like to talk about when talking to people who want to be educators. You've got to keep a valid license. You have an expired license. It's kind of like a doctor. If you had a doctor that came to you and said, I'm going to be doing brain surgery on you today, but my license is expired. Can you give me permission to still operate on you? I think most of us would say, no way, don't put me under. So same thing is true with people who want to be considered professionals. You have to have a valid license. We get busy, especially May through September, and we have to plan ahead 4 to 6 weeks to get those applications and the background checks done. There are 4 steps to our application. If you get that job offer, I can talk you through the process and be glad to help you. I'm also going to have soon in January, when things get updated, a PowerPoint slideshow that you can watch or go through to show you those steps step by step to make sure people get through it. And the Iowa Board of Educational Examiners has its own code of ethics for educators. You must follow those. You must be dealing with students in an ethical manner. We had a CT teacher just a couple of months ago, had an inappropriate romantic relationship with one of their students. And those are the ones that make the front page of the Des Moines Register, Sioux City Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Davenport newspaper, wherever you're at. We don't want that to happen. Thus, the ethics training and our ethics code is emailed to you once your license is issued. But obviously, if you are going into it to be the teacher, then you need to have professional relationships with those students that are under your care. I always say too, they're not your friend, they're your students. So we lead that into the next one. The BOE's stance is that teachers should not give their personal cell phone number to students. You know, it could be as a CTE person, you have a company phone and you give the students that are working part-time in your business or in that workplace your company phone. But when we look at past ethics violations and we go back and examine those by the numbers, the vast majority of ethics complaints against teachers who had some type of problem with a student, especially relationship ones, it starts with a text or a phone call. And so when you give those students your personal cell phone number, the door is opened. And once that student has their foot in the door, they're going to continue to text you and call you. So that's part of the professionalism. And along the same ones is we ask teachers and professional educators not to post inappropriate things on their blogs, either in some personal blog or posting site. When you identify students individually, or you say, well, I have 5 students in my class and this particular one is terrible and he needs to be medicated or something, that can pose a problem. And same thing with school issues. We have teachers sometimes that post things like, the superintendent made the worst call I've ever heard today for a fog day. That guy must be insane, or that woman must not know what she's doing in her job. Well, that may not be unethical for you to say that, but it could result in you not having a job the next day. So we always take time to stop and talk about ethics. And that is my last slide that I like to end with, because it hopefully leaves us on a positive note and gives you some encouragement of the education field. I'm more than welcome to answer questions or to respond to anyone. For those of you that are watching the tape, my email was on the beginning, one of the earlier slides, and you're welcome to email me, try to give me a call. I'm responsive to that and be glad to walk you through possibilities or scenarios.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your presentation today, Dave. Very enlightening and good, good tips and tricks at the end for encouragement and just keeping everyone on that correct path. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. I'm going to kick it off and ask a question to Dave just to kind of get the creative juices going. In your presentation, you mentioned the classes that the CTE instructors must take if they want to go above their 3 years. Are those classes typically paid for by the CTE instructor, or does the school pick them up, or have you seen specific employers pick that cost up?
It's a good question. Probably a little bit of both. I'd say mostly most districts probably expect the individual teacher to pick them up if they're going to make that their long-term job or their full-time position. They are all available online. I think I might have mentioned that. And many of the colleges or universities try to make them affordable. For instance, UNI offers most of them online through their distance learning program, and they charge $350 for a 2-credit class. You don't have to pay the full graduate credit if you go through their distance learning program. And some of them are also available through Iowa community colleges, which are a very affordable option. So good question, Amy, but that is generally on the shoulders of the teacher, but there are some schools that say, we want you to do this bad enough, we want you to stay, that we are going to help, or there might be some type of categorized funds that help them pay for that.
And moving on with that kind of the same thought, and I may have missed this, so when you're in that first 3 years, if you want your instructor license to move further past or back past that 3 years is when you have to take the classes. You don't have to take the classes if it stops at the 3 years. Is that correct?
Correct. I mentioned as one of my examples early in the presentation that some district or some companies rotate their people through. And that's another reason they do that. They have a person come teach welding for 1.5 years, and then they rotate out. They get another person to come in and do it with the CTE auth. They rotate out. They don't have to take the courses in those types of scenarios. And they don't have to be started before they get issued the license. And there are some people who do it for 1 year or 2 and say, this wasn't for me. This is an awful lot of work. Teachers are under a tremendous amount of pressure right now because of COVID, but there are some people who try it, and that's noble, and we appreciate that. But certainly you'll know after the first year or 1.5 years if this is something you really love, or if it's something that's very difficult to keep up with.
If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A, or I'll keep on asking questions to Dave because I always have 1,001 questions. I'll give you an easy one. What are the most popular classes or industries that you're seeing right now in the state of Iowa getting the CT instructor license?
Great question. I didn't touch on this at all. So probably the most popular one overall and the most number of people out there is building trades. So schools that want to create a construction program, or they want to create a sequence of courses, to start everything from the framing to the full house completion to home maintenance. There's a high demand for those jobs. And like my students at Earlham, they walked off of the graduation stage and immediately had a job for $12 or $15 an hour. So that's the number one area that we see the most. Gaining in popularity lately is probably the health sciences area. And with CNA training, there's an article in the Des Moines Register about that today, and that is increasing huge numbers, and there's money incentives for companies and schools to do that. And so we have a lot of people that are former nurses, or they're the school nurse, and they get a CTE authorization to teach health occupations. And they can do the CNA training. They can also teach students who are maybe wanting to get an intro to medical terminology if they're going to go to the community college to get their nursing RN degree, or if they're possibly going into medicine in some other area, whether it's PT work or as a doctor or chiropractor. We have people that get those very basic things in high school and some experience with the medical terminology through the health occupations endorsement.
That is awesome. I never would have thought about a school nurse becoming then the CTE instructor, because we do have a lot of high school registered apprenticeship programs that are starting in that CNA occupation. So that's a really good thought process if they're trying to figure out who can be that instructor. So thank you so much for bringing in both our traditional registered apprenticeship programs. And for those of you who have been on our webinar series, you've heard that there's a lot of different opportunities within healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and other occupations throughout different industries that you can start with registered apprenticeship in high school. So awesome. Ben, are you seeing any other questions coming in?
Nope, I am not seeing any other questions.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think of some other questions to ask you, Dave, in the meantime, just in case that other people have any questions that are coming in. But do you know how many initial CTE license we have currently, like in the state of Iowa right now?
I don't have a total number in my mind. I can say we did some data back in October, and throughout 2020, starting January through October, we'd issued about 180. So that was a good number for us, and probably one of our higher numbers in the past several years. But it is growing in popularity in more and more districts, and because of those career programs, we are seeing more and more of those being issued. Another reason for that increase in numbers is we have a shortage of people who get the 4-year teaching degree to become industrial tech, family consumer science, or agriculture teachers. People are not tending to go into teaching the traditional route right now. So districts have filled that backfill area with non-traditional people who don't have the 4-year degrees but have the expert experience.
That's a good point. And have you worked with any high schools around the state on the CTE instructor issue with their related to their high school registered apprenticeship program in the last few years?
It's sometimes I know everything about the program and sometimes I know nothing, just depending on how the applicant applies and whether or not the administrator contacts me. But yes, I've worked with a variety of districts and programs around the state, and we're seeing more and more of the small schools go together and create career programs and house those either in a facility set up by their local community college or just a collaborative approach. So they can provide enough students that the instructors that go to those regional centers have the numbers and they can share the costs and break that up. And that's certainly a trend we're seeing, and it's a positive one for our economy and for all the employers who need the folks who are going through these types of programs and the skills that they need to have.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for bringing in your wisdom. If you have any further questions, Dave can be reached let me grab his email again. It's david.wimpen@iowa.gov. And his phone number is on the screen. However, he, like you mentioned in his presentation, since he's working from home, email is always best to reach him. Just a few more data points. Thank you so much for coming and joining us with our webinar today. We have our last webinar next week on promising practices, talking about registered apprenticeship in high schools. We're going to have individuals from Pella, the Career Academy in Pella, the Davenport Community School District, and West Delaware Community School District to talk about their promising practices. And they're going to bring in some of their participating employers to tell you how it's working and what type of information information that they can share with you so you can have an outstanding program as well. Like I mentioned before, this videotaping will be on our Future Ready Iowa website and earnandlearniowa.gov following the completion of next week's webinar series. So we appreciate you taking the time, and we appreciate our presenter today, David. Thanks for taking the time and giving us all the knowledge and helping us grow our high school registered apprenticeship programs in the state of Iowa. So I hope you all have a great day and stay safe out there.